The night I got stuck at the bar with my CEO's wife was the night my carefully controlled life cracked open in ways I never expected. Rain hammered the windows like it was trying to break in, the power flickered once and then died, and the last train home vanished from the schedule with a dull electronic sigh. I remember thinking this was just another inconvenience in a long line of them, another reminder that I was a replaceable employee with a paycheck that barely held my life together. I did not know then that a single evening, trapped between thunder and neon light, would force me to confront the quiet truths I had been running from for years. Before the story pulls you any deeper, if you believe in kindness, in second chances, and in the idea that even the most ordinary nights can change a life, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. Your support keeps stories like this alive. The bar itself was one of those places people go to forget rather than celebrate. Low ceilings pressed the smoke and laughter downward, the floor was sticky with spilled drinks and broken plans, and the jukebox hummed softly on backup power like a tired heart refusing to stop. I had ducked in only to wait out the rain, my jacket soaked through, my phone battery blinking its last warning. That was when I noticed her at the far end, sitting alone, posture straight, eyes fixed on the condensation sliding down her glass. I recognized her instantly, not because she was famous, but because I had seen her photograph framed on my CEO's desk 100 times, smiling in charity galas and company newsletters. Seeing her there, without makeup perfection or public polish, felt like stumbling into a private room I was never meant to enter. I considered leaving. Everything in me said this was not my place. I was the guy who stayed late fixing spreadsheets, the one who nodded in meetings and disappeared afterward. She was part of a world of boardrooms and headlines, a world that had never asked for my opinion. But the storm outside was merciless, the streets flooded, and the bartender shook his head when I asked about closing. So I stayed, sitting at the opposite end, pretending to scroll through emails I no longer had the energy to answer. Minutes stretched into an hour. The power came back in weak pulses, enough to keep the lights dim and the bar warm. I noticed details I normally rushed past in life. The way the bartender wiped the counter like it was a ritual, the way the clock's second hand stuttered as if unsure whether to keep going. And I noticed her shoulders sag, just slightly, as if the weight of the world had found a place to rest. That was when I realized something unsettling. She looked exhausted in a way money could not fix. I had always believed success insulated people from pain. It was an easy lie, one that made my own struggles easier to swallow. Watching her that night dismantled that belief piece by piece. She was not the polished symbol of achievement from the office walls. She was someone sitting alone in a bar during a storm, just like me, trapped by circumstances she did not choose. Time has a strange way of loosening boundaries. Eventually, the silence between us became a shared thing rather than a dividing line. We did not exchange words, not at first, but there was an unspoken understanding in the way we both flinched when thunder cracked too close, in the way we both checked our phones and found no rescue waiting. I felt the urge to say something kind, something safe, but fear kept my mouth shut. One wrong move, I told myself, and my entire career could collapse. As the night deepened, my thoughts drifted to my own life. I was 35 and felt older. Carrying the quiet disappointment of a dream I had abandoned without ever fully admitting it. I had wanted to write once, to tell stories that mattered, but responsibilities piled up, and survival became the only goal. Sitting there, soaked and tired, I felt the familiar ache of regret press against my chest. I wondered if this was all there would ever be, safe invisibility punctuated by moments of silent envy. Something shifted when the bartender announced the doors would stay closed until the storm passed. It was not dramatic, just a fact, but it sealed our shared captivity. I noticed her take a slow breath, the kind people take when they realize they cannot escape and must simply endure. That was when I allowed myself to really see her. Not as my CEO's wife, not as an emblem of privilege, but as another human being caught in the same pause between one life moment and the next. Without turning my head fully, I made a small gesture, sliding a napkin toward the empty seat between us where water from the ceiling had begun to drip. It was nothing, barely an action at all, but she noticed. She nodded once, a quiet acknowledgement that felt heavier than words. In that moment, something inside me eased. Kindness did not need permission. The hours that followed were slow and heavy, but they were also strangely clarifying. I thought about the stories I told myself about people in power, about how easy their lives must be, how distant they were from ordinary pain. Watching her that night, I saw the cracks. I saw someone likely trapped by expectations, by a role she had not fully chosen, by a marriage that the world watched but never understood. It made me question my own assumptions, and with that questioning came a strange sense of relief. Maybe my life was not uniquely small. Maybe everyone, at every level, was just trying to breathe. When the storm finally began to weaken, the bar grew quieter. The jukebox fell silent, the bartender rested his elbows on the counter, and the city outside exhaled. I felt a pull inside me, a nudge to do something brave, something honest. Not dramatic, not reckless, just real. I pulled out a small notebook I carried everywhere, a habit from my abandoned writing days, and began to scribble. I wrote about the storm, about the bar, about two strangers sharing a silence that said more than conversation ever could. I did not write for an audience or a paycheck. I wrote because I needed to remember how it felt to be alive in a moment. I do not know if she noticed what I was doing, but at some point, I felt eyes on me. I did not look up. I kept writing until my hand cramped and my thoughts slowed. When I finally closed the notebook, I felt lighter, as if I had reclaimed a piece of myself I thought was gone forever. The storm outside had nearly ended, but something inside me had only just begun. Eventually, the doors opened. The rain softened to a whisper, the streets glistened, and the city felt reborn in reflections. People began to leave, pulling on jackets, shaking off the night. I stood, unsure whether to say anything at all. Part of me wanted to disappear back into my old routine, to pretend this night had never happened. Another part knew that would be a betrayal of everything I had just felt. As I turned to go, I caught a glimpse of her watching me, not with curiosity or judgment, but with something like understanding. There were no words exchanged, no promises, no dramatic gestures. Just a look that said she had seen me too, not as an employee or a stranger, but as a person trying to hold himself together in a complicated world. In the days that followed, life did not magically transform. I went back to work, answered emails, sat in meetings. But something had shifted. I noticed how my CEO spoke about his wife, carefully, almost reverently, and I wondered what storms they weathered behind closed doors. I noticed my own reflection more often, the way my eyes looked when I was honest with myself versus when I hid. And I started writing again, every night, without expectation, without fear. Weeks later, an unexpected email landed in my inbox. It was brief, professional, and indirect, but it carried weight. A new internal project was forming, one that required storytelling, empathy, and a human touch. My name had been suggested. There was no explanation of why, no reference to a stormy night or a bar that smelled of spilled beer and second chances. But I knew. Kindness, I learned, has a way of echoing. As I stepped into that new role, I realized the true impact of that night had nothing to do with being stuck or with who she was married to. It was about being seen and choosing to see in return. It was about recognizing that everyone carries invisible burdens and that small acts of humanity can quietly alter the course of a life. Now, as this story draws close to its end, if it has stirred something in you, if it has reminded you of a night or a moment that changed you in a subtle but permanent way, please take a second to engage with this video. Like it, share it, and let others know they are not alone in their quiet struggles. And before we finish, I have one special request. Scroll down and leave a comment about a moment when kindness, from a stranger or from yourself, shifted your path even slightly. Your story might be the light someone else is waiting for. Because sometimes, being stuck is not a punishment. Sometimes, it is an invitation to pause, to see, and to become someone braver than you were before.